This story is my story, and it's called Teotitlan and the Mysterious Kilos. Enchantment of Oaxaca was in the air, it was in the people's eyes, it was in the food, it was in the water itself, it was in the markets for sure. It was in the landscape with those whitewashed buildings nestled on the flat streets and up on the slopes. I knew that there was malnutrition in the early 1970s. That's when I was there. So there was this and there was that. Where there is so much light, there is so much dark. I've heard that from some wiser than myself. Now, I was looking for Teotitlan del Valle, and if you're a weaver and a spinner, you know about Teotitlan. It's very much a Oaxacan treasure where some of the greatest weavers and spinners in the world live. Now, I thought it was merely a barrio, a neighborhood, and I was walking all day, asking people, Teotitlan, ¿dónde está? I had no Spanish, but I was saying that, and people were just too kind to say, hey lady, you gotta get on a bus and go up the mountain. And I walked all day till I was footsore and weary. And at the end of the day, I realized I had heard autobus just a few times, and pueblo or puebla several times. Back at my lodging, I found out, of course, Teotitlan is the weaving village and the spinning village up the mountain. So, armed with a map to the autobus, I went and I paid my fare and I got on the bus feeling a little conspicuous. Everyone on the bus was holding a chicken on their lap. I had none. I was chickenless. So there were a few inquiring glances my way, but it was fine, and people were pretty curious. And I got up the mountain, and there it was, Teotitlan, and a lot of people got off the bus. Now, it is said in Teotitlan, besides the wonderful weavings and spinnings, that they have such pure water, for it is one of the first villages down from the water source on the mountain. And I could see that reflected in the brilliant white teeth of its inhabitants. Such beautiful people. And I was enchanted once again with the open studios. Oh, the men were weaving on floor looms. And much like my floor loom in San Francisco. And the women were spinning and dyeing on rather large wheels. I hung out at one weaver's and I looked at his album. I perused it. Oh, yes, it is true. Some of the weavers there are very well to do because they have corporate contracts all over the world. And this gentleman had a contract with Goodyear Blimp and woven this beautiful, kind of a hall weaving, like a mural of a Goodyear Blimp. And so I hung out to speak with him. Well, he spoke a little English, and I had no Spanish at that time. And I asked about one of my objectives, which was to become an apprentice there. And so I slowly, haltingly said, and with gesture, that I wanted to come to Teotitlan and stay there, God bless you, and become a weaving apprentice with this gentleman. He looked a little alarmed, actually. His eyes were big, and then he repeated back to me over and over, you want to come and stay here with me at my home? He didn't get the weaving apprentice part. So we called over a translator. I knew after a while, and he kept repeating that and looking incredulously at me, that this was lost in translation and not to be found. And so it was becoming awkward, and I quickly advanced to my second objective, which was to buy a lot of yarn. And so he fixed me up with a gentleman that was going to meet me in the Zocalo in Oaxaca City the very next day. And I was ready the next day. I had my duffel bag, and this gentleman met me, and he had this array of rainbow-colored yarn, all in skeins, and weighed by kilos, and some natural ones to boot. And this was a marvelous transaction. So I put all this yarn, skein after skein after skein, in my bag. Now, I said goodbye to my friends, and I went off to Merida in the Yucatan and took a flight to Miami, where my folks lived. So, in customs, I took out a skein of yarn. And then I took out another skein, and then I took out another skein, and then I took out another skein, and another, and all the mysterious kilos of yarn were laid out there. Well, the agent looked at all of that, and this is 1973, by the way, and he pushed all the skeins and prodded them and pinched each skein and just looked at me. What are you going to be doing with all this? And I assured him that I was a weaver. I was a bona fide weaver, and I had a studio in San Francisco, and well, I would be spinning up great things and weaving great things. And so then he took out my folk art wooden and we put it freestanding on the table. I had not noticed that it was riddled with termite holes, and it was exuding or oozing white powder.
Oh.
Yes, another agent was called. They peered at the owl from every vantage point. They sniffed the powder and tasted the powder. Well, I had some fast talking to do. And I said, you know, I think that's termite poop. And honestly, I never thought I'd stand up and say that in a story, but here I am. Finally, much later, I was out of customs. I called my dad. He picked me up. And from there, I went back to San Francisco and started weaving. But most of the dream happened in Santa Cruz, where I had a barn to weave in, and rafters, and I hung the rafters with a rainbow assortment of skeins, all those kilos, and some natural and undyed skeins at the end. That was my dream, and I wove, and I sold handbags and pillows. I had a small business. And back to San Francisco, where the dream ebbed and flowed and ebbed, and finally was put away. I trucked those around all over the country with me, those mysterious kilos. I had wrapped them in an artemisia, not the one that grows in the chaparral here, but another one that's said to keep varmints away, and kept the varmints away. I bet you know about that, Emily. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the artemisia. And then I gave it away, and there they are out into the world, shining in their beauty and their warm, soft texture for all who see them to love them. Thank you.